The U.S. Federal Reserve delivered its third straight interest rate increase of 0.75 of a percentage point on Wednesday and signaled a high likelihood of at least one more move of that size this year. Fed Chair Jerome Powell said U.S. central bank officials are strongly resolved to bring down inflation from the highest levels in 4 decades.
We're committed to getting inflation back down to 2% because we think that a failure to restore price stability would mean far greater pain later on.
The Fed raised its target interest rate to a range of 3 to 3.25%, the highest level since 2008. And new projections showed the policy rate rising to between 4.25% to 4.5% by the end of this year, before topping out at 4.5% to 4.75% in 2023. The Fed's projections, meanwhile, showed the economy slowing to a crawl in 2022, with year-end growth of 0.2%, rising to 1.2% in 2023, well below the economy's potential.
We have to get supply and demand back into alignment, and the way we do that is by slowing the economy.
Kevin Mon, president and chief investment officer at Hennion and Walsh Asset Management, said Wednesday he was surprised that the Federal Reserve announced it would continue raising interest rates so aggressively.
And my biggest concern at this point in time is that the Fed remains too hawkish in the face of an economy that continues to slow. We know that the economy has now met the technical definition of recession, and the yield curve also remains inverted. The yield curve has inverted prior to every recession in our country going back to 1955. So if in fact the Fed remains as hawkish as their dot plot chart is suggesting, I believe that could push the economy into a deeper and more protracted recession than would have otherwise occurred on its own.
The federal funds rate projected for the end of this year signals another 1.25 percentage points in rate hikes to come in the Fed's 2 remaining policy meetings in 2022, a level that implies another 75 basis point increase in the offing. Rate cuts are not foreseen until 2024.
How are Brazil's loose gun laws making it easier for gangs to obtain assault weapons? Since far-right President Jair Bolsonaro was elected in 2018 and began loosening gun laws, the number of registered gun owners has surged. Hundreds of thousands of Brazilians now legally own guns, including high-caliber weapons.
Armed people will never be enslaved.
Bolsonaro says the weapons are being bought by good Brazilians to help reduce crime, but a Reuters investigation has found that many of those firearms end up in the hands of the most violent criminals in Brazil. Over a dozen federal and state police officers told Reuters there is mounting evidence that legitimately acquired weapons are leaking onto the black market and are being used to commit crimes across the country. Bruno Langiani is the project manager of the Suda Paz, or Peace in Practice Institute.
Before Bolsonaro's government, we already had a problem with shooting association licenses. In thefts and robberies of residences, there were many weapon arsenals. Between 10 and 15 licensed guns go to crime. But this problem has increased a lot because now, with this possibility of buying a lot of rifles, you have an incentive with the infiltration of organized crime, putting a straw buyer with no criminal record who buy these weapons and pass them on to crime.
Bolsonaro, a nationalist former soldier, has made it easier for Brazilians to bulk buy firearms. Gun owners can register with the army as hunters, marksmen, or collectors, known as CACs. Nearly 700,000 Brazilians are now accredited as CACs, up almost 500% since 2018. Bolsonaro says the legally purchased weapons help reduce Brazil's murder rate, the highest in the world.
We defend weapons for decent citizens because we understand firearms. In addition to providing personal securities for our families, it's for our national security.
But experts dispute Bolsonaro's theory and warn there is a strong link between gun deaths and the number of firearms in circulation. In July, Reuters reported that Brazil's federal police disapproved of Bolsonaro's gun policies, arguing they would put more weapons in the hands of criminals. There are signs that's become a reality. Federal officers said Brazil's gangs are increasingly using legalized gun owners as straw buyers to replenish arsenals, or even steal weapons from CAC permit holders' homes. Bolsonaro's office did not respond to a request for comment. The federal police directed questions to the army, which grants CAC permits. It, too, did not respond.
The needs are so great, and truly every effort is either a life or death for so many people. And I've seen those lives who were saved, but I've also seen those who I've been speaking to people and thinking if enough aid doesn't come, they won't be here in the next few weeks. They won't make it. I think this is a real wake-up call to the world about where we are at. The climate change is not only real and it's not only coming, it's very much here. I'm overwhelmed, but I don't even feel it's fair to say that because I'm not living this. So I just simply try to speak out and help.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump and his adult children were sued on Wednesday for what New York State's Attorney General called numerous acts of fraud, accusing the family of misstating the values of real estate properties to obtain favorable loans and tax benefits. The move by Letitia James marks one of the biggest legal blows yet for the former president.
The pattern of fraud and deception that was used by Mr. Trump and the Trump Organization for their own financial benefit is astounding.
The former president's sons, Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, as well as his daughter Ivanka Trump, are also named as defendants in the suit, as well as the Trump Organization, a family company that manages hotels, golf courses, and other real estate around the world. At issue is how the company prepared Trump's annual statements of financial condition over the decade ending in 2021. James says Trump inflated his net worth by billions.
Claiming you have money that you do not have does not amount to the art of the deal. It's the art of the steal.
During the contentious 3-year investigation, James said her office uncovered more than 200 examples of misleading asset valuations on nearly 24 assets. In one case, she said the former president tried to make it look like his apartment in Trump Tower was nearly triple its actual square footage.
Tripling the size of the apartment for purposes of the valuation was intentional and deliberate fraud, not an honest mistake.
James also said Trump valued his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida as high as $739 million by pretending it could be developed for residential use when he knew there were restrictions. James said Mar-a-Lago should have been valued closer to $75 million.
No one is above the law.
James wants Trump and his children permanently barred from running any companies in New York, and Trump and his organization banned from doing real estate deals for 5 years. In a social media post, the former Republican president called the lawsuit another witch hunt and launched a personal attack on James, who is a Democrat.
Oh, what a crowd this is.
Trump is considering running for president again in 2024. He's at the center of a number of probes, including a court-approved search of his Mar-a-Lago estate over handling of records and a Georgia investigation into efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. He's also denied wrongdoing. This lawsuit was civil, meaning it did not involve criminal charges. Still, James says she'll refer allegations of criminal wrongdoing to federal prosecutors and the Internal Revenue Service.
Wall Street's main indexes seesawed before slumping in the final 30 minutes of trading to close sharply lower on Wednesday as investors absorbed the Federal Reserve's latest rate hike and future policy commentary.
And we anticipate that ongoing increases will be appropriate.
The Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ all fell roughly 1 3/4%, extending September's steep losses. At the end of its 2-day meeting, the Fed lifted its policy rate by 75 basis points for the third time to a 3 to 3.25% range, which most investors had expected. But some may have been surprised by policymakers signaling that more large increases are to come. Kevin Mon is president and chief investment officer at Hennion & Walsh Asset Management.
While I didn't believe that they were going to start cutting rate in 2023, I'm surprised that they're going to keep going. At this point in time, as we know, they don't meet in October. They come back in November and have one more meeting in December as well. I believe they're going to turn less hawkish in November and December and perhaps only raise by 50 basis points in November and 25 basis points in December. That type of less hawkish, not necessarily dovish, but less hawkish pivot should provide an upswing for stocks under the notion that the worst is now behind us.
Rate cuts are not foreseen until 2024, the central bank added, dashing any outstanding investor hopes that the Fed was betting on getting inflation under control in the near term. Inflation has been running at more than 3 times the central bank's 2% target. Perhaps also weighing on stocks Wednesday, the Fed's new projections showed the economy slowing to a crawl in 2022, with year-end growth of just 0.2%, rising to 1.2% in 2023, well below the economy's potential.